Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Eyes of Life show. I am your host, Yolo Schubert. I come to you today with the topic Where Policing Began the Code of Blue. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. Cat Williams since he's trending right now. So, Cat Williams had so much to say, ladies and gentlemen. Makes you want to believe some of the things he said, but um, I haven't seen too many people that came back to some of the things he was saying. But needless to say, he had a lot to say. And I was blown away by some of the things he was saying. He was very bold in what he was saying and with no remorse about anything that he said. So, with that said, okay, we are going to get ready to begin our show, um, The Eyes of Life, and we're going to start with police originally began in the South during the late 1600s. However, slaves patroller began about the year of 1704. So, y'all, what is actually a slave patroller? They were a group of men who were hired to return slaves to their master, owner, or enslaver. They were put into place for one reason, and I mean one reason, and that was to stop slaves from fleeing and rising up against their enslaver. Their job was to put fear into all slaves as well as free people of color. The way they would do this, I mean, you got to think about it, was through brutal tactics. I mean, brutal tactics. Are you serious? So you couldn't just return them. You caught them, but you couldn't just return them. You had to do brutal tactics. So, such as whipping and beating them, and sometimes, in some cases, some were hung. So, the ones that they caught that were slave or owned by someone, okay, I'm quite sure, they gave them a little beating or, roughed them up real bad and they returned them. Now, the ones that was free, I don't know if they were so blessed to be returned to where they belong. Who helped to keep the patrollers and who were these people? Where did these people come from? The enslavers, settlers from Europe, the richest men of the land, and other settlers who came to this land to practice planning on the backs of slavery. And the government during that time. These men were afraid of losing their way of life. They were afraid of losing their money. They were getting big money on the backs of slaves. So let's take a look at this. On the backs of slaves, these people are getting money. Their families are getting rich. They not trying to have us interfere with that. That's not happening. So what did they do? Of course, they had to hire these and these patrollers. Okay, and that is what these men were afraid of losing, their way of life. Keeping the controllers and keeping the control of Black, brown, free people of color and slaves. And why I say free people of color, you're going to find out shortly. This was to control where they could go and what times they were allowed to move from location to location. So you figure, you free. Why I got to worry about what time I'm going to go from location to location? Because, yeah, I am free. What were night watchers and slave catchers? Basically, even if you were a free person of color, you had to keep your freeman's papers with you at all times, just as a slave had to have written pass from his owner to move about. So you were free, but you still needed to keep your pass on you. So I'm trying to figure out, yeah, you were free, you were able to own land, you were able to do some of the things you wanted to do, but that was the one thing that was different between you and a slave. But you still yet had to have a pass, just like that slave had to have a pass to move about. They were considered the night and day slave patroller helpers. They were also kept around because they were found to be effective, just like the slave patrollers. They even had a badge created in Georgetown County of South Carolina in 1858. And the name of the badge was called Plantation Police for Runaway Slaves. Let me repeat that badge. Plantation Police for Runaway Slaves. Although slave catchers and night watchers did not issue warrants, nor did they take an oath, they were still allowed to harass Black and brown people and slaves. The difference between the slave catchers and the night watchers is they were not allowed to enforce a certain type of harsh treatment towards the slaves for fear they could be sued by the slave owners. Now, do you think that the free people was treated like that? So my question is, you couldn't enforce that type of harsh behavior towards the slaves. However, you were able to do it towards the free people of color. Why? Because you didn't have to worry about them having a master or an owner, because why? They were free. So they were able to enforce anything they wanted to enforce, even if they wanted to hang them. These night watchers, these slave catchers got away with that. Let's move on. Another example is the badge. So let's check out these police badges now. Okay, so the sheriff department has a badge. The police department has a badge. Now check this out. The badges for runaway slave patrollers and the sheriff department, both were somewhat the same design badges. The slave patroller and sheriff badge, their badges have a 5, 6, or 7-point star. And I got to find out what them stars mean, because them stars mean something for it to have 5, 6, or 7-pointed stars. Now, today's police, they carry a municipal shield. However, all badges carry the same justice, just with a different wording engraved on them. So, okay, they have a different word on them, but they still mean the same. The different policing eras from slavery to the present, by the hands of police and the black and brown races versus the death by police versus death by the slave patrollers to the slave people and free people of color. Keep in mind, I believe what really started this policing from slavery to present day is the Fugitive Slave Bill that was instituted by the lawmakers and white slave owners to control the slave people as well as the free people of color. Black and brown people were killed over 3 policing errors. So they're talking about defunding the police. No, we don't need to defund the police. They need to change their ways. They need to change their codes. They need to change the laws. Because as you're going to hear later on in the show, you're going to hear how they are still under those same laws. So if all this killing is going on, and let me tell you, people, they have 3 different eras. The political era was from 1840 to early 1900s. They were killing us then and not being punished. The reform era was from 1900 to 1980. During this time of the reform era that was from the 1900s and the 1980s, guess what? They were killing us still. Now you have the community era was from the 1980s to present day. And guess what? They're still killing us. The black, the brown people are still being killed. We are still being lynched, just not by a rope. If you take a look at George Floyd, that was a lynching. Just without a rope. Look at these people they actually killed. These police actually killed. Got one cop that I think that I'm remembering that actually went to jail. He went to jail for George Floyd. Did he get life in prison? Did he get the death penalty? Because I think he should have gotten the death penalty. Once again, I'm going to say this. The laws of this country was not made for black and brown people. So stop thinking that justice is for us. It's not. It's not for us. And I mean no harm when I say this. I have family members that are police officers. I love them to death, but they are under this code. Even things that they know, they still have to follow. So the best thing they can do is teach their brothers and sisters. They can teach their race what they shouldn't do, how they should act. Because they know they don't fall under this rule. These rules that they have, they were not made for people like us. They were not. Even a black police officer, a brown police officer, if they're pulled over by a white officer, if they don't present their badge with their driver's license and registration and insurance, they're going to be treated just like another black or brown person with disrespect. And I'm not going to say this goes for all white officers, but the majority ruled. So the good ones are falling short because there's so many that are out there that are treating us black and brown people so harshly. Like we don't deserve to be here. So no, them rules are not applying. So let's move forward. Today's police being blue, is there a difference? Is there a difference? Let's take a closer look. Why don't we take a closer look at these people? Let's take a look at some of the things that are being done today, and let's incorporate them in how they were being done back during the 1800s the middle 1800s. And yeah, there was some free people during the 1700s. And we even had some black people that were in offices in the 1700s. But however, keep in mind, black people wasn't allowed to vote. So what happened? Those white people pushed them black people right on out of office. That's what they did. So let's take a good look at what makes them no different. What are some of the things that the police are allowed to do right now in 2024 that they did in 2023, 2022, 2021, 2019, all the way back to 2010? Let's think about that. Stop and frisk. The police officer can stop and frisk you at any time. They can say, oh, you look like somebody we were looking for. That is the famous line. Oh, you look like somebody I was looking for. Okay, well, the person you come to find out the person you're looking for, they 6 foot tall. And the person you sitting there frisking and harassing, they 5'4". One is light, one is dark. First of all, the height difference is definitely no. That tells you right there. And the thing with this stop and frisk, in this policy, the police do not need a warrant to enforce this policy. So the police don't need a warrant to force this policy, but yet they can stop and pull you over. So if you're riding on a bike, and I have boys, I have one son, he loves to wear a hoodie. And I tell him, please take off that hoodie. I don't care if you ride on a bike. They're quick to pull you over. I remember they pulled him over one time because he was on the sidewalk, on a bike. And it was during rush hour, so he said, Mom, I didn't feel comfortable riding my bike in the biker's lane because there's no barricades in that biker's lane, really. So he didn't feel safe. What did they do? Oh, you look like a suspect I was looking for. Well, what are you pulling me over for? Example of that stop and frisk law. They can frisk you, go through your personals, go through your pockets. They don't need a warrant. You don't even have to be a wanted criminal for them to do it. You don't even have to have a record for them to do it. But just because you look like someone they are looking for. Okay? Let's go on to the next. Racial profiling. Remember we talked about that having to need your pass. Whether you were free or you were enslaved, you needed the pass from your enslaver, your owner, your master, to go from location to location. Okay? Let's check this out. Racial profiling. Like a black person walking through a mainly white neighborhood, however, who also lives in that neighborhood. So you have a black or brown person that's living in a neighborhood that's predominantly all white, but they got a few of us living in there. Few of us is living in there now because we can afford to live in there. So we're going to move on up. We're going to take our children out of that bad neighborhood and we're going to put them in a neighborhood that is good, where they can get better schooling, better education, better opportunities. But they also get that opportunity to be what? Racially profiled. Why? Because they're in a predominantly white neighborhood. Well, you don't see that many blacks or brown color people walking around. Let's go on. The many black and brown men who went to prison or murdered, who were innocent and pled their case with facts and witnesses, who were in prison during the Jim Crow law. Once again, remember, we got those 3 eras. They were still put in prison. They had witnesses. presented facts, true facts. They presented. However, they still went to jail. Why? Because the rules do not apply. They don't apply. We were supposed to be free by the Jim Crow era. So why they couldn't sit at the counter? Why did they have to get their food from another location? You get your food from the back. Oh no. We were just as human as that other race. But the black and brown people had to go to the back. The black and brown people had to sit in the back of the bus. The black and brown people does not once again fall under. We don't fall under that law. There's no safety for us under that law. There's none. We're policing. We're going to move on to the next. Where policing began with the Code of Blue era, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and even in some cases today, when the accuser is a person of color and the victim is white. Well, you know, we already guilty. Point blank, simple. We're going to be guilty no matter what. Because why? This white person is accusing us. Now, we accuse them. We're the victim, but yet we're the one. Wait a minute. We're the one. Hey, we're the one that's getting ready to go get handcuffed. Even though we're the victim, because they done pleaded the case. And if you watch these police officers. And unfortunately, our brothers and sisters that are under the Code of Blue, they have to follow suit if they want to have a peaceful career in the police department. They're going to go right to their white person first. This is what they're going to do. They're going to go right to that white person. They're going to hear their statement first, and then they're going to come to you. Well, let me hear your story. Why? You went straight to them, and I'm the one that called. I missed that. I called, but you go straight to them first. Yeah. We got to think about it. Look at the things that are being done to our people. Look at it. Oh, you're going to love this next one. Let's talk about the Stand Your Ground law. That's going to take you back to exactly that same rule that I was telling you that is right now till today, where the people that were slaves and the free people of color had to have that passed. And remember, this is where Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by George Floyd because he chose to acknowledge that Stand Your Ground law. Here's another law that comes from slavery that exists today, especially in Florida. So we got a whole bunch of black people in Florida. You may want to rethink that location that you live, because this rule here, this Stand Your Ground law, it is so effective. Here's another law that came from slavery that exists today. This came from the slave catchers, the night catchers, as well as many white persons who saw a black person without a white person in the area that they felt they should not be. What did George Zimmerman say? He looked suspicious. All white men were to report any black person seen without the appropriate paperwork or pass. If they were caught not reporting this type of finding, they were faced with a fine of 40 shillings. And let me tell you, that 40 shillings, that was a language on how they identified currency, money, during the early 1700s. Okay? That's how a lot of, I want to say, Irishmen, Englishmen, men of Wales, this is how they have identified money. They called it shillings. So they were fined 40 shillings because they didn't want to report that black or brown person or that free person of color that didn't have their papers, or that slave that you knew they didn't have the appropriate paperwork, but you just said, okay, I don't care. If they were found guilty of that, or if someone found them and seen that person and they knew you didn't turn it in, you got fined. So once again, George Floyd, this as well as Trayvon Martin, they got killed. These laws all portray a law that took place during slavery. Poor Trayvon Martin didn't even begin his life before George Zimmerman took it away. All because the stand your ground law, that law that came from that them enslavers, those government people at the time, the people that ran this country at the time, the richest white men in this country at the time came up with these laws. From the 1800s, the late 1700s, going in late 1600s, they came up with these laws. Is it sad? Yes, because guess what? We're still going, the police is still going by these laws. And if you don't believe me, look up Horace L. Roberts. Horace, Horace, middle initial L, last name Roberts, Robards. There's a document from Salisbury, North Carolina, dated January of 1856. Look at that document. And let's check out this thing. Original Slave Patroller's Oath. I do swear that I will ask searcher for guns, swords, and weapons, enabling the slaves in my district faithfully and as privately as I can discharge. Why you gotta do it privately? Why you can't just do it openly? Discharge the trust reposed in me as the law direct to the best of my power. So help me God. Repose the trust. So the trust. So it's about trust now, not about upholding the law. It's about trust. Let's look at today's police oath. On my honor, I will never betray my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will treat all individuals with dignity and respect. Let me read that part again. I will treat all individuals with dignity and respect, and ensure that my actions are dedicated to ensuring the safety of my community and the preservation of human life. So help me God. Now, this is today's police. This is part of their oath. This is their police oath. So where does this come in? Where does this mean that they are going to acknowledge the black and brown people under this oath? Because the people that I've seen get killed within the last 10 years, I don't see see where this oath had anything. These police officers could not have taken this oath. No way. No way, shape, form, or fashion that any officer that took place in killing any black person, brown person, took this oath, because they didn't do any of what was in this oath. They didn't treat all individuals with dignity and respect. They missed that part. They didn't ensure the safety. They missed that part. That whole thing right there was thrown out the window. They didn't honor that. They didn't honor it. Not at all. So I say, if we don't start teaching our young black and brown children, grandchildren, about this country and they laws, let them know from the door the minute they're able to understand, the minute they are able to learn, instill in them the laws of this country does not apply to them. These laws were created when we had no rights. And we still don't have no rights. These laws that our police supposed to go by, they're supposed to be governed under. If they followed them, and we're going to talk about some more things. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these things. They did not honor them. Will all races ever be looked at as equal? If they continue to use the slave patroller laws, no. Defunding the police is not the problem. The problem is the outdated laws and codes they continue to police by. This is the problem. This is the problem. And this is why I say this. Police is taught to shoot to kill. Let me just hit you with that punchline. The police are taught to shoot to kill, aiming straightly for the chest. See this? The chest. They're going to aim straight for the chest. That's how they're trained. However, I find it the most mind-boggling thing with this, though. I find it that most police use this mainly on the black and brown race when it comes to situations that arrive. However, when it is the same situation involving a white race, most of them come out still having a heartbeat and will live. But they're trying to kill. They all trained to shoot the chest. Even if they plead insanity. However, black, brown race is dead and cannot plead insanity because they're dead. They followed that rule, shoot to kill. They didn't shoot to lame so that person can stand trial. They shot him dead clean on. But I find it that you have so many that are still walking this earth, sitting in a cell or sitting in a mental institution that did some act that was similar to what a black person did, and they were shot and killed dead on. That's something I find strange. So as we go on in our day-to-day life, we have to keep in mind that the laws of this land, the policing and the way it is done in this land does not protect us. It is not for our race. It is not for our people. We don't have laws to protect us in this land, whether it be in a court. It does not protect us. Unless you have an attorney, I will advise anyone never to go to court and think you're going to plead a case on your own. Never stand there in front of a police officer without a videotape going on. Because why? Your word against his will never be proven the truth. Never. So I thank you for watching the Eyes of Life show. I am your host, Yolo Schubert. Thank you for watching our show today. I hope you got some kind of educational teaching out of this show. I hope you can go back and, replay it for your children, your grandchildren. Get them to see certain things. Anything and everything that I'm saying to you, you can Google it. You can see things on the web. You can go to the library. These are things that you can actually find out for yourself, and you will see that what I'm saying to you is true. Just look at what's going on the TV. Thank you. Join us next week as we go over. We're going to go over our Constitution. And I'm going to explain why the Constitution, again, was not written for Black and brown people. Everyone have a blessed and wonderful night. Look forward to seeing you next week.